Welcome to InstaOwl's classes. We at InstaOwl believe in democratizing education for one and for all. Welcome students, let's see this interesting chapter, The Age of Industrialization. Now, industrialization in colonial India. You have seen the dawn of industrialization which started from England and how it grew. Now let's see India. Colonial industrialization, exploration of how industrialization occurred in India during colonial times. Factory and non-mechanized sectors. Analysis includes both factory industries and the non-mechanized sector. Primary focus was on textiles. Discussion primarily centered around development of textile industries in colonial India. Please understand that the primary textile was what was in India. We had a lot of handloom, we had a lot of charkha, and that is why our main industry was from the rural background. That was the primary products or the cotton industry. Let's see the evolution of Indian textile trade. Pre-industrial dominance. Before machine industries, Indian silk and cotton dominated the global textile market. Finer varieties of cotton textiles were highly sought after, with coarser cotton produced elsewhere. So fine cotton means a very thin strand of cotton was more in demand, but coarser cotton means a little thicker cotton was in demand elsewhere. Let's see trade networks. Armenian and Persian merchants transported Indian textile to Central Asia, Afghanistan and Persia. Armenian and Persian are Central Asian traders or merchants used to come to India, take Indian textiles, cotton, silk and take it back to their place. Indian ports like Surat, Masulipatinam and Hooghly facilitated vibrant sea trade, connecting India to the Gulf, Red Sea and Southeast Asian ports. Role of merchants and bankers. Now remember, wherever there are merchants, there's trade, there's money, and if there's money, there are banks. And if there are banks, we have bankers. Indian merchants and bankers financed production, transported goods and supplied exporters. Supply merchants linked inland weaving villages to port towns, advancing funds to weavers and procuring cloth. So these people gave them money. That is why they were financiers or they were bankers. And why was this money needed in the colonial time? This money was needed so that from the inland villages where you could get the products, it would get transported to the ports, and from the port towns, they would be exported outside India. Decline of traditional trade networks. Now we are seeing that because of machines, because of the coming of industries, there was a little decline in the traditional sector. By the 1750s, Indian-controlled trade networks began to break down. European companies gained power, securing trade monopolies and leading to the decline of old ports like Surat and Hooghly. Let's see the rise of colonial ports. Bombay and Calcutta grew as new centers of trade controlled by European companies. European companies, why? Which European companies came to us? We have the EIC, that is the East India Company that came. We also have the Dutch. Before English, we also had the Dutch who came. And before them, we also have Portuguese trading companies who came to India for trade. The shift from old ports to new ones marked the growth of colonial power and European control over trade. Impact on weavers and artisans. Now let's see the impact of this new rise of colonial ports. The transformation of trade networks under European control significantly affected the lives of weavers and artisans, raising questions about their livelihoods. Now please remember that weavers and artisans, they were traditional men or traditional handicraft men who would make their textile, who would make their artwork and sell it to the kings, the queens or the people, the patrons. But when the English started taking over this, they did not pay them very well or they did not use their handloom very well. They started with mechanized sector, that is mechanized factories, machines to make these textiles. And that is why that was a very big problem for these artisans and weavers because they could lose their livelihoods. This is an illustration of the English factory at Surat, that is Gujarat. This is a 17th century drawing. The weavers' struggle. Initial impact of East India Company rule. Textile exports from India initially remained strong post the 1760s. Indian fine textiles were in high demand in Europe. The East India Company aimed to expand these textile exports all over Europe. Challenges before political control. Pre-1760s, companies struggled to secure regular supplies of cloth. Why? We've got competition from the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and also local traders. Weavers and supply merchants had bargaining power and could choose their buyers. So now, pre-1760s, we see that the weavers and the merchants had more control on their products. Monopoly and control post-political power. Now, post-1760s, that is after 1760s, we see a change in scenario. The East India Company established monopoly over trade. Why? Because after 1760s, they started taking control over the politics of our country. And that is why we have many acts after 1760. You've seen 1773, you've seen the Regulating Act. You will see many acts, many wars that were won by East India Company in India, and that is why now they could control trade. East India Company established monopoly over trade, developed a system to eliminate competition and control costs. Direct control over weavers. The company appointed gomasts to supervise weavers and ensure quality. What are gomastas? Gomastas were Indian commercial agents of the British East India Company. Gomasts. Now, what did these gomasts do? Gomasts were like supervisors. They were supervisors. Who would they supervise? They would supervise the artisans, the weavers, and the people. Gomastas prevented weavers from selling to other buyers. Yes, they would see that they sold only to the company, that is East India Company, and not to other buyers. System of advances. Advances means to give money in advance for any production. Weavers received loans and were bound to supply only to the English company. Let's see the impact on weavers. Increased reliance in weaving with entire families engaged in the process. The mother, the father, the child, the daughter, everybody was into weaving. Loss of bargaining power and access to alternative buyers. They did lose this power. Why? Because first, there was no monopoly. They could sell to many people, many buyers. But now, they could not do this. Why? Because it was the East India Company who had monopoly. Gomasts, often outsiders, imposed harsh measures on weavers. Resistance and migration. Clashes between weavers and gomasts. Reports of harsh punishments. Weavers deserted villages, migrated or revolted against the company. They only had two choices. Either stay in their home place and revolt or leave the village. Some weavers refused loans, closed workshops and turned to agriculture. New challenges by the 19th century. Cotton weavers faced additional difficulties as the 19th century approached. Please look at the screen. This is an illustration of a weaver at work in Gujarat. Let's see the decline of Indian textile exports. Initial dominance of Indian textiles. 1772, high demand for Indian textiles, unmatched quality globally. But by 1811-12, textiles made up to 33% of India's exports. 1/3 of our trade came from textiles. But by 1850 and 51, textile exports dropped to just 3%. So you can see that in a span of 30 to 40 years, the textile started declining. Rise of Manchester goods. Manchester goods from London. Growth of cotton industries in England led to concerns about foreign imports. British government imposed import duties on Indian textiles. Now you can see over here is that because India was exporting so many goods, we were exporting raw material, exporting cotton, it was exporting textiles. Nobody wanted the British goods. They didn't want the British goods. Why? Because there was a lot of demand for Indian textiles. But this was hampering the economy of the British. That is why they started imposing extreme fines or duties on import so that they could reduce import from India. And that is why in the 1850s you see that our exports reduced to 3%. They did not like it. The East India Company now promoted British cotton goods in Indian markets. They wanted to get more income and promote their products in our markets. The impact of Indian weavers. Indian export market collapsed, totally destroyed. Local markets flooded with cheap Manchester imports, making competition very difficult. Weaving regions in India reported widespread decline by the 1850s. What are the challenges during the American Civil War? 1860s, raw cotton supply from the US was cut off, increasing Indian exports. Prices of raw cotton in India skyrocketed, making it unaffordable for local weavers. Weaving became increasingly unprofitable. Now, this was how, the foreign affairs have been affecting Indian markets. Because of the war, the prices rose extremely high. It made it very difficult for local weavers to buy cotton. Factory competition in India. Late 19th century, Indian factories began mass producing machine goods. Now I told you, machines had taken over human skilled labor. Weaving industry struggled to survive amidst growing competition from factories. Now the competition was between weavers and machines. And definitely machines were going to win in this competition. Please look at the screen. This is an illustration of the Bombay Harbour, a late 18th century drawing. Let's see Instabites. Decline of cloth trade in Bihar. 20 years ago, thriving cloth trade in Jahanabad and Bihar. Current state, trade in Jahanabad ceased, very limited in Bihar. Cause, inability to compete with cheap, durable Manchester goods. So because of the incoming of cheap goods from London, that is from Manchester, nobody wanted the thriving cloth trade that was happening in these two regions of the country. And within 20 years, we can see, within 20 years, the cloth trade had totally declined in India. Decline of Koshti weavers. Koshti weavers faced hard times, similar to other fine cloth weavers in India. Unable to compete with the influx of showy Manchester goods, many Koshtis emigrated to Berar for work as day laborers seeking better wages. So nobody wanted the traditional Koshti weaving cloth from them. And that is why they were facing competition from the cheap influx of the Manchester goods, very cheap products. That is why they emigrated. Emigrate means they left their hometown and moved to Berar, which is now in the southern part of Karnataka, for work as simple day laborers seeking better wages. So in this part, what have we studied? We have studied the evolution of Indian textile trade. You have seen in the 1760s, Indian textile market was in huge demand. Till the late 19th century, where we can see that the influx of the Manchester goods by 1850s, our trade dropped down to only 3%. We have seen the decline of the Indian textile trade because of the British policies and because of the East India Company taking monopoly of trade. I hope students, you are enjoying studying this chapter with me. Please stay tuned to our next video on the same chapter. Thank you.